But once you understand the intricate details of how a story works, or even just the basic structure of how a story really works, you really begin to realize that all stories are basically the same. What's up, everybody? It's your boy, Jaron Ikner, back again with another episode of the Polyartist Podcast. This is a podcast for artists who are looking to elevate their creativity, turn their passions into professions, and do dope shit, because that's what polyartists do. Today, we're diving into the fascinating world of storytelling, which is by far like my favorite thing in the world, period. Like, stories are everything. I'll explain later, but stories are everything. So in this episode, we're going to explore the history of stories, why they're so important, and why they connect so much to being a polyartist. If you enjoy this episode, make sure you like, subscribe, follow, do all the stuff that people do on YouTube. I really appreciate it. Also, don't forget to check out the Patreon page for exclusive content and resources designed to help you thrive as a polyartist. So we're going to talk about the history of storytelling first. Storytelling is by far one of the oldest forms of human communication, dating all the way back to the ancient times, from the cave paintings of Ako and the epic tales of Homer. Stories have been a fundamental part of the human culture and expression. They were used to convey history, morals, beliefs long before the written word was established. Cave paintings like the ones found in France depicted scenes of daily life, hunting, rituals, and visual narratives for human societies. It's kind of crazy, like, when you think about it, because it's like stories were the main way of survival back in the day. I mean, I guess they kind of still are if you really want to think about it, but if you saw a woolly mammoth or a saber-toothed tiger or something, you had to tell the story to your fellow tribe members or they could find themselves in danger. So stories became like a very critical part of society, just in terms of spreading information, spreading knowledge, and these stories would get passed down to different generations. And even to this day, stories hold so much weight and they're so important in everything that we do. It's crazy. Moving forward in history, ancient Greeks were master storytellers. Homer's Iliad and the Odyssey are prime examples of epic storytelling that have stood the test of time. These stories were not just entertainment, they were ways to preserve history, teach lessons, and convey cultural values. So if we fast forward to the Middle Ages, you have the oral tradition of storytelling through bards and minstrels and people who travel from village to village, spreading stories of like knights and dragons and love and adventure. And this would go on to inspire people to go do great things. You always hear the tried and true story of Excalibur and King Arthur and all that stuff. These are stories that are embedded into the culture and passed down for generations and generations. One of the most impactful stories of all time is the ancient epic Indian story, the Mahabharata. This epic not only tells the story of a great war, but also explores the complex themes like duty, righteousness, and the human condition. It's a prime example of how storytelling can be used to convey deep philosophical ideas and societal values. The Mahabharata characters like Arjuna and Krishna are still revered, and their stories are told over and over in various forms of media. So we need to talk about why storytelling is so important. I kind of already touched on it, it spreads information. But it's more than just that, and it's more than just a form of entertainment. It's a way to connect, communicate, and inspire. Stories have the power to bring out emotions, create empathy, and influence behavior. They can transcend cultural and linguistic barriers and make universal languages of sorts. Throughout storytelling, we can share experiences, convey our values, and inspire others. It's a very powerful tool for building and connecting with people and understanding them in different ways. So consider the impact of Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin, for example. This novel played a really big role in shaping public opinion about slavery in the United States. Through its powerful narrative and emotional appeal, it galvanized abolitionists to make a movement against the groundwork that started the Civil War. Stowe's ability to tell compelling stories that touch people's hearts and minds demonstrate the profound impact that storytelling can actually have in society. So we need to talk about the connection to storytelling and polyartists. So when it comes to being a polyartist, storytelling is an essential tool in our creative arsenal. Whether you're a musician, painter, writer, filmmaker, the ability to tell a compelling story can really elevate your work and take you to the next level, and also make your work much more impactful. Storytelling allows polyartists to weave their diverse skills into a cohesive narrative, creating a richer, more engaging experience for their audience. It's about using your multiple talents to tell a story that resonates on many levels. Okay, so I'm gonna take a quick water break. Thirsty. Remember, always drink water. I think that's actually probably one of the most underrated things that you can do to help your creativity and your storytelling ability is to drink some water. I know it's kind of simple, but trust me, it works. But alongside my water, I'm gonna pop some of this. What is this exactly? Well, this is Magic Mind. It's actually really, really good. It's like an energy productivity shot. It's super duper good. Like they reached out to me and they wanted me to, talk about it on this podcast. And I'm like, sure, I already rock with this product. It has all kinds of dope stuff in it from ashwagandha, matcha, olive oil, all these great things that help you stay stimulated in the game. But then also without giving you that burnout that like coffee gives you sometimes. Because sometimes I'll drink a bunch of coffee and I'll just be like burnt out like 4 hours later. But this actually doesn't do that. Like this lasts for like a good like 6 or 7 hours. And then by the time I'm done with it, I'm ready to go to bed. Like I'm not like up all jittery trying to figure out how to go to sleep. Like this is a nice smooth letdown. Like it's really, really good. It sharpens your mind. It lowers your stress. It gives calm energy. Like I'm telling you, man, that Magic Mind is really like the jam. I keep trying to tell people. And in order to just make sure that you guys understand how good this is, we're actually gonna give out a free trial of this. So I think it's gonna be the first 10 people that click on the link in the comments, either on the podcast page or my YouTube channel. We're gonna give you a 3-pack free trial. So I say you head over to Magic Mind, use the link below in the comments, and we'll go ahead and send that over to you. And you can try it out for yourself, and then you won't think that I'm capping and saying all this wild stuff. So once again, head over to magicmind.com/Jaron trial, and you'll get a free 3-pack free trial of Magic Mind, no questions asked. You can try it out for yourself. And if you think it sucks, let us know, but I highly doubt that you will. I think you'll actually love this. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but I'm never wrong. I'm never wrong. So storytelling can enhance your work in a variety of different ways. One is engagement. A well-told story can capture the audience's attention and keep them engaged. Another one's emotion. If your stories can evoke emotion, it will make more impact and make them more memorable. Another one is connection. A relatable story can create a deep connection between artists and their audience. Also, meaning. Stories that add depth and meaning to your work make them much more appealing and just better. That's just facts. So here's a couple of fun facts about stories that you guys maybe didn't know. I didn't know this. I learned this. This is a learning experience for me too. So a study from Jaron Ikner, a marketing professor at Stanford Graduate School of Business, found that people remember information better when it's conveyed as a story rather than just giving you the facts. And according to a study by a consulting firm called Delalites, 70% of people believe that stories are the best way to create emotional connections with brands. The human brain is wired for storytelling. Neuroscientists have found that stories activate parts of the brain that allow the listener to turn the story into their own idea and experience. Now, that's part of it for me too, is that when it comes to storytelling, it's about being able to tell your story. Everybody has their own story to tell. And when we watch these movies and we watch these TV shows or even read books, we like to connect to the character in ways that are unique. Like I find a little bit of myself inside these characters. I find a little bit of myself inside these stories. And that's how we become invested and become attached to these stories, because we hope to see these people win because they're living our lives or doing something that we want to experience or something that we relate to. And so we just want to see how that plays out for them. Maybe good, maybe bad, but either way, we're still invested in how that journey goes. So we're gonna actually talk about the different types of storytelling. There's a bunch, there's a lot. Like I said, making this podcast was eye-opening for me because I always pride myself on like, oh, I'm a storyteller and I know this and this and this, but I didn't realize how many different versions there were of storytelling out there and like the names for them. So like I said, this has been a learning experience for me too. We're all learning together. So we're gonna talk about the different types of storytelling. We're gonna start with the easy ones, the more popular ones, and then kind of get into some more crazier ones that we haven't quite heard of, or maybe you have, but I didn't know about. One is the 3-act structure. This is the most popular storytelling framework probably out there, especially in screenwriting and literature. It divides the story into 3 parts, 3 acts: the setup, the confrontation, and the resolution. With Act 1, the setup usually introduces the main characters, the setting, and then the conflict where things change. Act 2, the protagonist or the hero, the main character, we're going to call them, faces challenges and obstacles that lead to the climax, which goes into Act 3, where the conflict is resolved and the story concludes. So prime example are many Hollywood films, but ones are like The Matrix and The Godfather. they all kind of follow the structure. So act one of the Matrix is Neo living in the world that he's in, and then he realizes it's the Matrix, he gets out of the Matrix, and that's the main conflict, is understanding what the Matrix is and what he's going to do about it, which he kind of goes through that journey in Act 2, and in Act 3 he confronts whatever the agents or the Matrix itself, depending on what movie you're watching, in order to find a resolution. So this one is called Frey's Pyramid. Developed by Gustav Freytag, this structure is actually a 5-part narrative arc, which includes exposition, rise in action, climax, fall in action, and denouement. So examples are like a lot of Shakespeare plays, Hamlet, Macbeth. They often follow the Freytag pyramid. Number 3 is the 7 basic plots, or the Christopher Booker's theory, which suggests that there are 7 basic plots that all stories must follow. 1 is overcoming the monster, so where the protagonist faces a great evil or opposition that they have to overcome. Next is rags to riches. This is where the protagonist rises from humble beginnings to greatness. Then there's the quest. This is where the protagonist embarks on a journey to achieve a goal. Then you have the voyage and return. This is where the protagonist goes to a strange land and returns changed, different. There's also comedy, where it's light and humorous and stories with a happy ending. Then there's also tragedy, the protagonist's downfall due to a flaw or a mistake that they made. But then there's also the rebirth, where the protagonist experiences a transformation or renewal, oftentimes due to tragedy or some type of life-changing moment or event that allows them to see the world differently. So big examples are Lord of the Rings, which is like the quest, we have to go on this journey to put the ring into the fire, destroy the ring. Then you have Cinderella, which is like a rags to riches story. And then you have Jaws, overcoming the monster. These are all basic ideas that are ingrained into all stories, but you just kind of have to look for the nuances and understand that a lot of stories are basically the same, just replacing characters and replacing pieces. Now, this next one I'm going to probably completely mess up the pronunciation of, because I didn't do enough research on it, and I guess it's going to be a trend where I pronounce something wrong every episode. Maybe. We'll see. Kisho Tenketsu, which is a traditional Eastern Asian narrative structure that emphasizes the development of ideas rather than conflict. So Kai, which is introducing the characters in the setting. Sho, which is developing the stories without major changes. Ten, which is the twist, where it introduces a plot twist or a moment that is unexpected. And Ketsu, which resolves the story by tying together the introduction and the twist. So a lot of Japanese manga and films, such as like My Neighbor Totoro, follow this format. And it's pretty much ingrained in Japanese culture. That's their strongest form of storytelling, which is a little bit different from the 3-act structure. Up next, we have the inverted pyramid, commonly used in journalism. This structure presents information in descending order of importance. So you have the lead, which is the most critical point of information. If you read an article in a newspaper or online, the first paragraph of every article, typically speaking, is the lead, which basically breaks down the most important thing about the article that you need to know. So like a summary, sentence, whatever, breaks down what the article's about that you're about to read, so you can move on. Then you have the body, which adds different details, adds some background information, some context. Then you have the tail, which is the least important amount of information. But like I said, this is how most news articles and reports are put together. And this is a journalistic structure that allows for information to be delivered as fast as possible. Up next is a circular narrative, a structure where the story ends where it began, creating a sense of closure and completeness. So for the beginning, introducing the setting and the characters, you have the middle where you develop the conflict and the plot, and then you have the end where you kind of return to where you started, but you have a different perspective on it. There's plenty of movies that follow this, but one of the most famous ones is 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Make sure you check that out. It's a good story. Then we have modular narrative, a non-linear structure where the story is presented in segments or modules can be rearranged. So you'll have self-contained sections of the story. You'll have links between segments that form an overall narrative, but they don't necessarily go in an order that makes sense until it all comes together. I would say that probably one of the most popular examples of this storytelling style is Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction. That movie is quintessential when it comes to telling a narrative out of order and kind of letting the audience kind of figure out and put pieces together, because even parts of that story never get answered. and it's up for the viewer or the audience to kind of surmise and kind of make their own conclusions. Prime example being, we never do see what's inside the briefcase that they're holding the entire movie, right? We did see them open it, but we don't see what's inside of it. And if you know what's inside the briefcase in Pulp Fiction, leave a comment on this video or on this podcast episode. I would love to hear your theories on that, because I've heard all kinds of stuff, from gold to the meaning of life to all kinds of fun stuff. I would love to hear your theories on it though. So moving on, we're going to talk about episodic structures. This is a series of interconnected but standalone episodes or TV segments that are used in TV shows and anthologies. Oftentimes these episodes or stories have their own plot, but then they connect to like a larger narrative. Typically speaking, like, X-Files or Black Mirror, Twilight Zone, even like The Office. A lot of TV shows have these overall arcs, usually season-long arcs, where there's a thing that's gonna happen at the end of the season, whether it's like the bad guy's gonna show up, or the company's getting sold, or something. And each individual episode will touch on that point, but then that episode will have its own storyline as well that's like internal to that episode. Very popular TV telling format. It's probably the most popular in TV, period. So we're gonna get into some tips and strategies to understand story structure a little bit better. So to effectively incorporate storytelling into your art, it's important to understand basic story structure. As you know by now, most stories follow a structure that includes setup, conflict, and resolution. And the setup often includes the characters and settings, the conflict presents a challenge or problem, and the resolution ties everything together, often leaving the audience with a sense of closure. And that's the most important part about storytelling, is making the audience feel that sense of closure. Most stories, all stories have a beginning, middle, and end. Now, some people might play around with that, but typically speaking, 9 times out of 10, every story has a beginning, every story has a middle, every story has an end. Now, if you want to get your Quentin Tarantino on, you can start at the end, but you probably would need to get to the beginning at some point and explain that so it makes sense as a contained package. And part of it too is also building emotional connections, because great stories resonate on an emotional level. So think about the emotions you want to evoke in your audience when you tell these stories, whether it's joy, sorrow, fear, hope. Emotional connections really make your work a lot more memorable. You can use your polyartist skills to enhance these emotions through music, visual performance, drawing. It's about bringing out those emotions that you may not be able to convey in one medium or the other. And as a polyartist, this is something that I pride myself on. When I sit down with my clients, I'll be like, hey, what medium do you feel the most comfortable telling your story in? Because we can make a song, we can make a video, we can do photos, we can write it out. Because it's not always, we should just write a story, right? Maybe you're better with a camera. Maybe you're better at playing guitar. It's about understanding the best format and best delivery method to getting your story out. So here's some practical advice incorporating storytelling in your work. Think about how you can infuse storytelling into your creations. For visual artists, this might mean creating a series of paintings that tell your story. Musicians can use lyrics to weave narratives, and filmmakers can use visual storytelling to evoke emotions and convey messages. That's the obvious stuff, right? But it's about kind of crossing the streams. Like if you're a filmmaker, maybe try scoring. If you're a musician, maybe you try shooting your own music video. Or if you're a writer, maybe you take some photos that help accompany the writing to really bring out that message a little bit more. It's about crossing the streams and finding new ways and new pathways to get the story out there. Understanding story structure is also very critical too, because once you familiarize yourself with the basic elements of story structure, such as setup, conflict, and resolution, and understanding these components, they can really help you create more engaging works. Trust me on this. Take some more story theory class, or maybe this has been enough, but once you understand the intricate details of how a story works, or even just the basic structure of how a story really works, you really begin to realize that all stories are basically the same. It's just about using that format to bring out the best emotional connection that you possibly can. Because great stories resonate on an emotional level. When you think about emotions, you want to evoke something in your audience that they maybe never felt before, or something they weren't expecting to feel. And that's how your story can achieve that, by connecting different polyartic streams to bring out something new. Or if you think about genres and movies, they exist for a reason. If you go to a horror movie, you're expecting to be scared. You're expecting to feel fear, right? And because of that, you have to convey that piece of art in a way that's going to bring out that fear, or you kind of failed at your job. So whether it's joy, sorrow, fear, hope, emotional connections are by far one of the most important things that you can do when telling these stories. But we're going to talk about skill development though, because what you really need to do is study great storytellers. Because if you analyze their work and how they operate in the field, study their techniques, study their narrative structures, how they engage an audience, you might learn some stuff that you might be able to apply to your own work. Now, that doesn't mean go and steal all of Quentin Tarantino's film styles and scripts, but maybe reading a couple of his scripts to understand how he writes a story might help you write a better story. Also, this comes down to practice, right? Just like anything else, you have to practice. Experiment with different storytelling techniques and see what works with you best and with your audience, because you might want to tell a story in one way, but your audience might connect with it in another way. And so practicing those skill sets and really finding cool ways to connect with people is more important than telling a good story. You want to tell a story that connects. And not all good stories connect. Some stories are really, really good, but the audience is just not there for them, right? So understanding your audience and understanding what your audience is looking for, with the emotional connection and your storytelling styles, putting this all together really is the secret to being a great storyteller and in turn being a great polyartist. So just to recap everything that went down on today's episode, because we kind of covered a lot. We talked about storytelling and the power of it. We touched on the history a little bit, but most importantly, we talked about why storytelling is so important for polyartists. We talked about story structures, including the hero's journey and the 3-act structure. And we talked about how storytelling can enhance your creative work and making it more engaging and impactful. Remember to incorporate storytelling techniques into your art, study great storytellers, and continually practice, bitch, practice. So hopefully you got something out of this episode of the Polyartist Podcast. I did. Like I said, I learned a little bit about storytelling that I didn't quite know about. But if you did enjoy this episode, make sure you do subscribe and like it, because it helps a lot. And stay tuned for the next episode, because it's coming a lot sooner than you think. If you're on Spotify, leave us a like or maybe participate in our poll. We do appreciate that. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit the subscribe. We appreciate you so much. We'll be back again with another episode of the Polyartist Podcast as soon as possible. I love you all. Stay safe. Oh, by the way, we're going to have some special bonus content based on this episode over on our Patreon page. So if you're into stories and maybe want to learn more about story structure, make sure you go check that out on Patreon. I'll put the link in the comment section. I really appreciate you guys. Y'all take care. Peace.